The knock came at 9:47 p.m. I remember because I was staring at the microwave clock, waiting for the water to boil, counting seconds like I'd been doing for 5 years, calculating rent, measuring rice portions, splitting a single chicken breast into 3 meals. The apartment was silent except for the hum of that old microwave and my son's breathing from the couch, where he'd fallen asleep with his math homework still open on his chest. Then the knock. 3 soft taps. Gentle. Almost apologetic. I knew who it was before I even moved. Something inside me recognized the rhythm. The same rhythm that used to wake me at 2 a.m. when he'd come home smelling like someone else's perfume. The same careful politeness he'd use right before asking for something he had no right to ask for. I should have left the door closed. Through the peephole, I saw him. 5 years older. Hair shorter. Wearing a button-down shirt I didn't recognize. The kind of shirt people wear when they're trying to look responsible, like costume pieces for a role they're auditioning for but have never actually played. He was holding flowers. Supermarket flowers. The cheap kind wrapped in plastic with a $4.99 sticker still visible on the cellophane. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Behind me, I could hear Lucas shifting on the couch, his small body curling tighter into the worn cushions that I'd bought second-hand 3 apartments ago. That couch had moved with us 4 times. 4 different apartments in 5 years. Each one a little smaller than the last. Each one carefully chosen based on a single criterion: what I could afford after splitting my paycheck between rent, utilities, food, and the medical bills he'd promised to help with but never did. The flowers trembled slightly in his hand. Was he nervous? Did he have the audacity to be nervous? I opened the door 6 inches. Just enough to block Lucas from view. Just enough to smell the cologne. New cologne, expensive cologne, the kind that costs more than I spent on groceries in a week. "Hi," he said. Voice soft. Eyes doing that thing they used to do. Vulnerable, wounded, like he was the one who'd been abandoned. I didn't say anything. I know it's late. I've been thinking. A lot. About Lucas. About everything. He shifted his weight from foot to foot. The flowers dipped lower. I want to be part of his life again. I want to be his father again. The hallway light flickered. One of those cheap fluorescent bulbs the landlord refused to change. It cast his face in alternating shadow and harsh white light. A face I used to trace with my fingers. A face I used to trust. You want to be his father again? The word tasted bitter. Again implies you were his father before. He flinched. Good. I made mistakes. I know that. But people change. I've changed. He extended the flowers toward me like a peace offering. Like cheap carnations could somehow bridge the gap of 1,825 days of silence. I have a good job now. I'm stable. I can help. I want to help. Stable. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. He was stable now. Now. After 5 years of returned letters, blocked numbers, courthouse no-shows, and a child support balance that accumulated zeros like bad memories. He was stable now that Lucas had learned to tie his own shoes because I was working a double shift. Stable now that my son had stopped asking why his father didn't come to his birthday parties. Stable now that the hard part was over, the sleepless nights, the generic brand diapers, the fevers at 3 a.m. with no insurance, the school forms that asked for father's name and made Lucas's hand pause over the blank line. Behind me, Lucas stirred. Mom. His voice, small, sleepy, innocent, cut through everything. My ex's eyes shifted past me, trying to catch a glimpse, trying to see the boy he'd walked away from when he was 3, the boy who was now 8 and had his father's eyebrows and my resilience, the boy who'd learned to be strong because he had no choice. It's nothing, baby, I called back, my voice steadier than my hands. Go back to sleep. I looked at the man in the hallway, at his expensive cologne and cheap flowers, at his newfound stability and convenient timing, at the audacity of someone who thought 5 years of absence could be erased with 3 soft knocks and the word again. Something inside me was still breathing. Something that had survived eviction notices and disconnection warnings, and the kind of poverty that makes you steal toilet paper from public bathrooms. Something that had learned the difference between a father and a man who shows up when it's easy. I took the flowers. And then I closed the door. But I didn't lock it. Not yet. Because this story, our story, was far from over. The flowers sat on the kitchen counter, wilting in their plastic wrapper. I didn't put them in water. I just stared at them, the way you stare at evidence in a crime scene, something that proves a violation but can't undo it. Lucas was asleep again. The door was locked now. The hallway was quiet. But my mind wasn't. It pulled me back. 6 years. Maybe 7. To a different apartment, a different version of myself, one who still believed in promises. I was 5 months pregnant. My belly had just started to show, that first undeniable curve that made strangers smile at me in grocery stores. I remember feeling proud. Terrified, but proud. We weren't ready, not financially, not emotionally, but I thought we'd figure it out together. That's what you do when you love someone. You figure it out. He came home late that night. Again. It was becoming a pattern, though I didn't want to call it that yet. Patterns meant problems, and I wasn't ready to admit we had problems. Where were you? I asked, trying to keep my voice light, casual, like I was just curious and not counting the hours since his shift ended. Work ran late. He didn't look at me when he said it. Just kicked off his shoes and headed for the bedroom. Your phone was off. Battery died. 2 sentences. Both probably lies. I felt it then, the first crack. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a hairline fracture in the foundation of everything I thought we were building. I followed him to the bedroom. He was already pulling off his shirt, and I caught a whiff of something that wasn't his usual smell. Perfume. Sweet. Floral. Not mine. Did you eat? I asked because I needed him to stay in the room, needed him to look at me, needed him to tell me I was imagining things. Yeah. Grabbed something with the guys. But there were no texts from the guys. No missed calls. No explanations that added up. I put my hand on my belly. Lucas, though we didn't know his name yet, kicked. A tiny flutter, like a reminder that I wasn't alone, even when I felt completely alone. We need to talk about the doctor's appointment next week, I said. The ultrasound. They said you could come this time. See the baby. He nodded, but his eyes were on his phone, scrolling through something that was apparently more important than the child we'd made together. Will you come? Yeah. Maybe. I'll try. Maybe. I'll try. Those words should have told me everything. But I was still in love with the version of him I'd met 2 years earlier, the one who brought me coffee without asking, who kissed my forehead when he thought I was sleeping, who said he wanted to build a life with me. I didn't know yet that people could split into 2 versions. The one they were, and the one you needed them to be. He didn't come to the ultrasound. He texted an hour after the appointment time. Something came up. Sorry. I sat in that waiting room alone, surrounded by couples holding hands, men with their arms around their pregnant partners, watching them whisper and laugh and cry together when they saw their babies on the screen. When the technician asked, "Is Dad coming?" I smiled and said, "He got stuck at work." It was easier than saying the truth. I don't know where he is. I don't know if he cares. I don't know if I'm doing this alone. The technician showed me the heartbeat. That tiny, flickering light on the screen. And I made a promise right there in that dark room with the cold gel on my belly and tears I wouldn't let fall. I will never let you feel the kind of emptiness I feel right now. That was the first crack. It would take another 1.5 years for the whole structure to collapse. For him to walk out with a garbage bag full of his clothes and a rehearsed speech about needing space and not being ready and still caring about me, but needing to find himself. But it started that night. With wilted flowers of a different kind. The kind that bloom as excuses, that grow in the soil of small betrayals, that spread until they choke everything you planted together. I blinked. The kitchen came back into focus. The real flowers, the cheap, guilt-stained ones, were still on the counter. 5 years of silence. 5 years of unanswered calls and unpaid support, and a child who learned to stop asking when Daddy was coming home. And now he wanted to be a father again. I picked up the flowers and dropped them in the trash. Some things don't deserve water. Before everything shattered, there were mornings. Simple mornings. The kind you don't appreciate until they're gone. When sunlight came through the kitchen window at exactly 7:15 a.m. and hit the counter in a way that made even instant coffee look like something worth waking up for. I had a routine back then. A small one, but it was mine. Ours. I'd wake up first, always. Pregnancy insomnia had become my companion, so by the time the alarm went off, I'd already been awake for an hour, feeling Lucas, though we didn't know his name yet, doing somersaults inside me like he was training for something. Like he knew, even then, that life was going to require resilience. I'd make coffee. 2 cups. 1 for me, decaf, doctor's orders, and 1 for him, regular. 2 sugars. No cream. I knew it by heart, the way you know the lyrics to a song you've heard too many times. I'd set his cup on the counter, right next to the small ceramic bird I'd bought at a thrift store our first month living together. It was ugly, honestly. A chipped blue thing with one wing slightly lower than the other, like it had crash-landed and never quite recovered. But he'd laughed when I brought it home, said it reminded him of me, broken but still trying to fly. I thought it was romantic then. Now I realize it was a warning. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom. A bathroom where the shower pressure changed moods depending on whether the neighbors were home. A living room that doubled as a dining room, office, and storage space. We didn't have much. A couch his brother gave us. A TV we'd found on Craigslist. Mismatched plates. A single set of sheets because we couldn't afford backup. But it was ours. I remember the way he'd come up behind me while I was washing dishes, wrap his arms around my growing belly, and whisper, "Good morning, little one," to my stomach before he ever said good morning to me. It used to make me smile. Used to make me think he was going to be a good father. That we were going to make it work. On Saturdays, we had a tradition. We'd walk to the corner store, the one with the hand-painted sign that said Lopez Groceries, even though everyone just called it the bodega, and he'd buy me a chocolate croissant. The cheap kind, wrapped in plastic, nothing fancy. But it was our thing. He'd break it in half and we'd sit on the bench outside our building, eating in silence, watching the neighborhood wake up. The old man who fed pigeons. The teenager who skateboarded past every morning at exactly 8:30. The woman with the German shepherd who always smiled at us like she knew something we didn't. When the baby comes, he'd say, we'll bring them here too. Make it a family thing. When the baby comes. He always said when, never if. Back then, I thought it meant he was committed. Now I know it just meant he hadn't decided to leave yet. I decorated the corner of our bedroom for the baby. A small space, barely big enough for a crib, but I'd made it work. I painted the wall myself, a soft yellow because we didn't know if Lucas was going to be a boy or girl, and yellow felt like hope, like sunshine, like something good was coming. I'd bought a mobile at a yard sale. Little wooden stars that spun when you touched them, catching light and casting tiny shadows on the ceiling. I'd hang it above where the crib would go and imagine our baby staring up at it, mesmerized, safe, loved. He helped me paint. Got more paint on himself than the wall, but he tried. We laughed. We kissed. We talked about names and futures and all the things young, broke, naive people talk about when they think love is enough. I had a photo from that day. Us, covered in yellow paint, smiling like idiots. His hand on my belly. My hand on his. I kept it in a small frame on the nightstand, the only photo I'd bothered to print and frame because it felt like proof. Proof that we were real. That this was real. Every night, before bed, I'd read to my belly. Whatever book I had, sometimes parenting guides, sometimes novels, sometimes just articles from magazines I'd picked up at the library. I wanted Lucas to know my voice, to feel surrounded by words and warmth and the promise that no matter what, he'd never be alone. And he'd be there sometimes. My ex lying next to me, half asleep, one hand resting on my side. I thought it meant he was present, that he was there. I didn't realize yet that you could be physically next to someone and emotionally gone. There was a moment, I remember it so clearly it still hurts, when everything felt perfect. We were lying in bed, late at night, and Lucas kicked so hard that my whole belly moved. I grabbed his hand, pressed it against the spot, and we both felt it. That tiny, fierce little person fighting to make themselves known. "That's our kid," he whispered, and his voice cracked. "That's really our kid." I thought I saw tears in his eyes. I thought it was joy. Maybe it was fear. Maybe he was already planning his exit and feeling guilty about it. Maybe he loved us and left anyway, which is somehow worse than never loving us at all. I didn't know then that these mornings, these routines, these small pockets of joy, were the last good days. That the croissants would stop. That the coffee would go cold. That the ceramic bird would be one of the few things I'd pack when I moved, alone, into the first of 4 apartments that got smaller and colder and lonelier with every lease. But for a moment, a brief and beautiful moment, I had everything. A partner. A home. A future. And I didn't know I was supposed to be memorizing it. 3 weeks of sleepless nights. 3 weeks of learning how to be a mother with stitches that still hurt and breasts that leaked through every shirt I owned. 3 weeks of trying to figure out how to keep a tiny human alive while my own body felt like it was falling apart. He left on a Tuesday. I remember because it was trash day. The trucks came early, making that grinding sound that woke Lucas up screaming at 6 a.m. I was already awake. I was always awake. Sleep had become a myth, something other people did, people whose partners helped with night feedings and diaper changes. He wasn't one of those partners. He'd been pulling away since the delivery. I told myself it was normal, that new fathers get scared, that he just needed time to adjust. I made excuses the way you make coffee in the morning. Automatic, thoughtless, necessary to function. But that morning, I found him in the bedroom, packing. Not packing for a trip. Packing to leave. A garbage bag. Black. The cheap kind that rips if you put too much in it. He was stuffing his clothes inside. Shirts, jeans, the jacket I'd bought him for his birthday. Moving fast. Not looking at me. "What are you doing?" My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. "I can't do this." He didn't stop packing. Lucas was crying in the other room. That newborn cry that sounds like the end of the world because, to them, it is. He needed to be fed, changed, held. He needed his father to give a damn. Can't do what? This. All of it. He gestured vaguely at the apartment, at me, at the sound of his son crying. "I'm not ready. You weren't ready 3 weeks ago either. Or 9 months ago. But here we are." He finally looked at me. And I saw it. The decision was already made. This wasn't a conversation. It was a notification. I need space. Space. I laughed. It came out broken. "Our son is 3 weeks old and you need space." "I'm sorry." 2 words. Said like they meant something. Like they could somehow cover the crater he was about to leave in our lives. Lucas's crying got louder. More desperate. I wanted to go to him but I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process that this was actually happening. "What about child support?" I asked because my brain was grasping for logistics, for something concrete in the chaos. "What about helping with?" "I'll send money. I promise. I need to figure things out." Promises. The same promises he'd made when I was pregnant. When we painted that yellow wall. When he said he'd be there. He zipped up the garbage bag. Lucas screamed. I stood there in my unwashed pajamas, milk staining my shirt, my body still healing from bringing his child into the world, and I watched him walk toward the door. "Please don't do this," I said. Hated myself for saying it. For begging. for giving him the satisfaction of knowing he was breaking me. He stopped. Hand on the doorknob. For a second, I thought he'd change his mind. Thought maybe love would be enough. Thought maybe his son's crying would reach whatever part of him was still human. "I'm sorry," he said again. And then he left. The door clicked shut. Soft. Gentle. The same 3-tap rhythm from the beginning. Lucas kept crying. I stood in the bedroom, staring at the space where he'd been standing, and something inside me fractured. Not broke. Breaking implies noise, drama, something you can see. This was quieter. Like the sound of ice cracking under weight you didn't know it was carrying. I went to Lucas. Picked him up. His small body against mine, both of us shaking. I sat in the rocking chair we'd bought at a yard sale, and I fed him while tears I couldn't control ran down my face and dripped onto his perfect, oblivious head. "It's okay," I whispered to him. To me. To no one. "We're okay." We weren't okay. The money he promised. It came twice. 2 payments in 5 years. $200 each time. $400 total for a child's entire life. I called. He didn't answer. I texted. He blocked me. I went through the courts. He didn't show up. Child support piled up like a debt I couldn't collect. Numbers on paper that meant nothing except proof that he'd chosen himself over us. Over his son. Over any responsibility he'd created. I moved. First apartment to second. Second to third. Each one smaller. Cheaper. Farther from the life I thought we'd have. I worked doubles. Triples. Left Lucas with neighbors I barely knew because I couldn't afford childcare and had no family close enough to help. Came home to find him asleep on their couch, small and trusting, and carried him back to whatever apartment we were surviving in that year. I fed him first. Always. If there wasn't enough food, I'd lie and say I'd eaten at work. Watch him eat peanut butter sandwiches and fruit I'd stretch across 3 days while my stomach cramped and my vision blurred. I kept the ceramic bird. Stupid, broken thing. Moved it from apartment to apartment like it meant something. Like holding on to one piece of the past could somehow make sense of how completely he dismantled our future. 5 years. 5 years of silence. 5 years of watching Lucas grow up without a father. Of answering his questions with half-truths and redirection. Of seeing him notice other kids with dads at soccer games and school events and pretending not to see the hurt in his eyes when he stopped asking when his dad was coming back. 5 years of doing it alone. And then the knock came. 3 soft taps. Holding cheap flowers. Saying he wanted to be a father again. The rejection emails came in waves. I applied to 43 jobs in the first 6 months after he left. I know because I kept a spreadsheet on a laptop I'd borrowed from the library. Administrative assistant. Receptionist. Data entry. Retail. Anything with health insurance. Anything with hours that didn't require night shifts because I had no one to watch Lucas while I worked. Most didn't respond at all. The ones that did sent automated messages. "Thank you for your interest. We've decided to move forward with other candidates." Other candidates. People without gaps in their resume. People who could work weekends. People who didn't have to leave interviews early because daycare closed at 6 and the bus took 45 minutes and being late meant paying $1 per minute penalty I couldn't afford. I got 3 interviews. The first one, I wore a blazer I'd bought at Goodwill. Navy blue. 1 button missing, but you couldn't tell if I kept it closed. I'd practiced my answers in the bathroom mirror while Lucas napped, rehearsing confidence I didn't feel. The interviewer was a woman in her 50s. Kind eyes. She smiled when I walked in. "Tell me about yourself," she said. I told her about my work ethic. My attention to detail. My ability to multitask. I didn't mention that multitasking meant feeding a toddler while filling out job applications, or that attention to detail was a skill I'd learned from reading medicine labels at 3 a.m. trying to figure out if the generic brand would work as well as the name brand I couldn't afford. "I see there's a gap in your employment history," she said, pointing to the resume I'd printed at the library for 20 cents a page. "I took time off to care for my son." She nodded. "Understanding. Warm. And childcare? If you're hired, what's your plan for coverage?" My plan was a neighbor who charged $8 an hour under the table and sometimes forgot to change his diaper. My plan was unreliable and potentially illegal and the best I could manage. "I have reliable childcare arranged," I lied. "Wonderful. And you're available for occasional overtime? Weekend shifts if needed." I thought about Lucas. About the look on his face when I dropped him off at that neighbor's apartment at 7 a.m. and didn't pick him up until 6 p.m. About how he'd started crying every time I put on shoes, like he knew shoes meant I was leaving. "Yes," I said. Another lie. I didn't get the job. The second interview went worse. The hiring manager was a man who spent the entire 15 minutes explaining why the position required flexibility and dedication, and someone who can really commit to the company's mission. He looked at my resume like it was evidence of character failure. "So you're a single mother?" he asked. Not illegal to ask, but close enough to make me uncomfortable. "I am." "Kids get sick a lot, don't they?" "I'm very reliable," I said, hating the defensive edge in my voice. He hired someone else. Someone younger. Someone without complications. The third interview, I didn't even make it inside. Lucas got sick that morning. A fever of 102. I couldn't leave him. Couldn't afford a doctor. Couldn't reschedule because I'd already rescheduled once when the bus didn't show up. I sent an email apologizing. They never responded. Bills piled up like evidence of failure. Electric. Water. Credit cards I'd opened for emergencies that had become everyday necessities. The balance on my phone crept higher every month. Late fees stacked on late fees. Interest compounded into numbers that made my chest tight. I'd sit at the kitchen table at night, calculator in hand, trying to make the math work. Rent was $800. Utilities maybe $150 if I kept the heat low and the lights off when Lucas was asleep. Food, if I was careful, if I bought generic, if I stretched everything, maybe $200. Diapers, wipes, formula when I couldn't breastfeed anymore because stress dried up my milk supply. Another $100. That left nothing for the medical bills from his birth. Nothing for the student loans from the degree I never finished. Nothing for childcare. Nothing for the car that barely ran. Nothing for clothes when Lucas outgrew everything every 3 months. The math didn't work. It never worked. I'd redo it, change variables, cut corners that couldn't be cut, and still come up short. Some nights I'd skip meals and tell Lucas I'd eaten at work. Watch him devour mac and cheese from a box that cost 89 cents while my stomach cramped and my hands shook, and I wondered how long a person could survive on coffee and willpower. I applied for assistance. Food stamps. WIC. Medicaid for Lucas. The applications were humiliating. Pages of questions asking me to prove how thoroughly I'd failed, how completely I couldn't provide for my child without government help. The caseworker looked at me like I was a statistic. Another single mother who'd made bad choices and now wanted someone else to fix them. "Father's information?" she asked, pen hovering over the form. "He doesn't pay child support." "Have you pursued legal action?" "Yes." "He doesn't show up to court." She made a note. Checked a box. Moved on like this was routine, like abandoned mothers were so common they barely merited eye contact. I got approved for $194 a month in food stamps. It helped. It wasn't enough, but it helped. The worst part wasn't the poverty. It was the invisibility. The way people looked through me, at the grocery store when I used my benefits card, at the pediatrician's office when I asked if they had payment plans, at the park when other mothers talked about their weekends away while I calculated whether I could afford the bus fare to get Lucas to the free clinic. I became an expert in shame. In smiling when I wanted to scream. In saying, "We're fine," when we were drowning. And every night, I'd look at the ceramic bird on the counter, That stupid, broken, useless thing. And I'd think about him. About where he was. What he was doing. Whether he ever thought about us. Whether he slept well at night knowing his son was growing up in apartments with cockroaches and neighbors who yelled through the walls. Whether he felt anything at all. I promised myself I wouldn't break. But some promises are harder to keep than others. There's a specific kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. It lives in your bones. Makes your teeth ache. Turns your vision gray around the edges like the world is slowly fading to static. I reached that kind of tired when Lucas turned 4. It was winter. The kind that creeps into old apartments through gaps in windows you can't afford to replace. I kept the heat at 62 degrees because anything higher meant choosing between warmth and food, and Lucas needed to eat more than I needed to feel my fingers. We'd been evicted from the second apartment. Not because I didn't pay rent. I did, always, even when it meant my bank account hit negative and stayed there. But the building was sold. New owners wanted to renovate. Wanted tenants who could afford the $400 rent increase they were planning. I had 30 days to find somewhere new. I spent every lunch break on my phone, scrolling through listings that might as well have been written in a language I didn't speak. First, last, and security deposit required. That was 3 months rent up front. I had $340 in my checking account and $8,000 in credit card debt I was drowning in. The apartment I found was in a neighborhood I'd driven past but never stopped in. The kind where you don't leave anything valuable in your car. Where sirens are background noise. Where the playground has broken equipment no one bothers to fix. But it was $650 a month. And the landlord didn't run a credit check. I took it. The walls were thin. So thin I could hear our neighbors' arguments, their television, their lives bleeding into ours through cheap drywall. There was mold in the bathroom that I scrubbed with bleach I bought at the dollar store, but it kept coming back, dark and spreading like a stain I couldn't erase. Lucas got sick that first month. A cough that turned into something worse. Fever that spiked at night and made him shake in my arms while I pressed cold washcloths to his forehead and calculated whether I could afford urgent care or if I should wait and hope it passed on its own. I waited. Because I had to. Because the copay at urgent care was $75 and I needed that money for electricity. He got better. Eventually. But the guilt didn't. It sat in my chest like a weight, reminding me that I was failing. That a good mother would have taken him to the doctor immediately. That poverty was making me gamble with my child's health. I worked doubles. Triples when they'd let me. Came home at midnight to find Lucas asleep on the couch at a neighbor's apartment. Her TV still blaring, and I'd carry him home feeling like the worst person alive. One night, he asked me a question that broke something inside me. Mom, why don't we have money like other people? He was 4 years old and already aware of the gap between what we had and what everyone else seemed to have so easily. I didn't know how to answer. Didn't know how to explain that his father had chosen absence. That the system was designed to let men walk away while women drowned. That I was working myself to exhaustion, and it still wasn't enough. We have what we need, baby, I said, because what else could I say? But we didn't. Not really. I started having thoughts I'd never had before. Dark thoughts. Thoughts about how much easier everything would be if I just stopped. If I gave up. If I let someone else take care of Lucas, because clearly I couldn't. I'd stand in the bathroom at 2 a.m., staring at my reflection. Hollow eyes, skin that looked gray, a body that felt like it was shutting down, and I'd think about calling social services. About admitting defeat. About handing my son to people who could actually provide for him. He deserved better than this. Better than an apartment with mold and thin walls. Better than a mother who fed him first and then pretended she wasn't hungry. Better than a life where poverty was the only constant. I sat on the bathroom floor one night, back against the tub, and I let myself cry. Not the silent tears I'd mastered. Real crying. The kind that shakes your whole body. The kind that comes from a place so deep you didn't know it existed. I thought about the ceramic bird on the counter. Still there. Still broken. Still somehow surviving every move, every catastrophe, every moment I wanted to throw it away but couldn't. And I thought about Lucas. About the way he smiled when I came home. About how he'd wrap his small arms around my neck and say, "I love you, Mommy." Like it was the easiest thing in the world. Like I was enough, even when I knew I wasn't. I thought about giving up. The thought sat there, heavy and tempting, like sleep after 3 days awake. But something inside me was still breathing. Something stubborn. Something that refused to let his father win. That refused to prove everyone right who'd looked at me like I was a statistic, a failure, a cautionary tale. I stood up, washed my face, looked at myself in the mirror, and I made a different promise. Not that I wouldn't break. I was already broken. But that I wouldn't stay broken. That I'd find a way, even if I didn't know what that way looked like yet. I walked back to the living room. Lucas was asleep on the couch, his small chest rising and falling, peaceful and perfect and completely dependent on me. I covered him with a blanket, kissed his forehead, whispered words he couldn't hear but I needed to say. I won't give up. I promise. I won't give up. The library became my sanctuary. Not because I loved reading, though I did, but because it was free. Free heat in the winter. Free air conditioning in the summer. Free internet. Free bathrooms where the soap dispensers actually worked. And free childcare, in a way. They had a children's section with books and puzzles where Lucas could sit for hours while I searched for jobs on their computers, applied for assistance programs, filled out forms that asked me to quantify my failure in boxes too small to contain the truth. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays the library stayed open until 8 p.m. and I could stretch our time there. Delay going back to the apartment where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought through walls so thin their anger became our soundtrack. Lucas was in the children's corner, building a tower with blocks. He'd learned to entertain himself. Had to. 5 years old and already more independent than any child should be. I was on the computer, staring at another rejection email, when I noticed a flyer on the bulletin board next to me. Free Career Development Workshop. Computer Skills Training. Resume Building. Interview Prep. No experience necessary. The words blurred together at first. I'd seen 1,000 flyers like this. Programs that promised help but required things I didn't have. Time, transportation, childcare, energy. But something made me read it again. Free. Evenings and weekends. Childcare provided. Certificate upon completion. I took a picture of it with my phone. Told myself I'd think about it. Told myself I was too tired, too behind, too broken to start something new. But that night, after I put Lucas to bed in our tiny apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with the ceramic bird staring at me from the counter, and I pulled up the website. The application was simple. Name. Contact information. Why do you want to participate? My cursor blinked in the empty box. Why did I want to participate? Because I was drowning. Because 5 years of struggling had taught me that working harder at jobs that paid minimum wage would never be enough. Because I wanted Lucas to have a mother who wasn't just surviving but actually living. Because I was tired of being invisible. I typed, I want to provide a better life for my son. Simple. True. The only reason that mattered. I hit submit before I could talk myself out of it. 3 days later, I got an email. I was accepted. Classes started the following Monday. 6 weeks, 2 evenings a week. 3 hours per session. They'd provide dinner and supervision for children. I read the email 5 times, waiting for the catch. There had to be a catch. Nothing was actually free. Nothing was actually accessible. Nothing was designed for people like me, single mothers with no safety net and no margin for error. But the email was genuine. The program was real. I showed up that first Monday terrified. Brought Lucas, who clung to my hand and asked questions I couldn't answer because I didn't know what to expect either. There were 12 other women in the room. All of us looked the same. Tired, skeptical, carrying the weight of lives that had taught us not to hope for too much. The instructor was a woman named Carol, mid-50s, kind eyes. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know you're tired," she said. "I know you have 100 reasons to walk out of here and never come back. But you showed up. That's the hardest part. Everything else, we can teach you." She taught us Excel, Word, basic coding, how to format a resume so it didn't scream desperate, how to answer interview questions without apologizing for gaps in employment. But more than that, she taught us that we weren't broken, that poverty wasn't a character flaw, that struggling didn't make us failures. I soaked it in like someone dying of thirst. For 6 weeks, I showed up. Lucas played with other kids in the supervised childcare room. I learned skills I didn't know existed. I rewrote my resume 17 times until Carol said, "This is good. This shows who you are." On the last day, Carol handed us certificates, printed on cardstock, official looking, proof that we'd done something. "This is just the beginning," she said. "You have the skills. Now you need to believe you deserve to use them." I took that certificate home and taped it to the refrigerator, next to Lucas's drawings and the overdue bills and the reminders of everything I still couldn't fix. But it was something. A small thing. A piece of paper that said I was capable, that I was more than the circumstances that had tried to define me. 2 weeks later, I applied for a job I never would have applied for before. Administrative assistant at a non-profit. Benefits. Salary. Normal hours. I used the skills Carol taught me. Formatted my resume the right way. Practiced interview questions in the bathroom mirror. Showed up confident even though my hands were shaking. The interviewer asked about my employment gap. "I took time to raise my son and develop new professional skills," I said. Not apologizing. Not explaining. Just stating facts. She nodded. Smiled. "Tell me about those skills." I got the job. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't overnight transformation. It was one small decision. To fill out an application, to show up, to believe that maybe I deserved something better. That created a crack in the wall I'd been throwing myself against for 5 years. Something inside me was still breathing. And now, for the first time in a long time, it was breathing a little easier. The first paycheck came 2 weeks after I started. I stared at the direct deposit notification on my phone like it was written in a language I'd forgotten how to read. $1,847.32. After taxes. After insurance. More money than I'd seen in a single payment in 5 years. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried. Not sad tears. Not desperate tears. Something else. Relief, maybe. Or disbelief. Or the feeling you get when you've been holding your breath underwater and finally break the surface. The job itself was simple. Answer phones. Schedule appointments. Manage the executive director's calendar. File paperwork. Tasks I could do in my sleep, but they paid me a living wage to do them. They gave me health insurance. Paid time off. A desk with my name on a little placard. Respect. The first thing I did with that paycheck was take Lucas to the grocery store. Not the discount store where everything came in dented cans and expired packaging. A real grocery store. The kind with produce that didn't have soft spots and meat that wasn't gray around the edges. "Can we get this?" Lucas asked, holding up a box of name-brand cereal with a cartoon character on the front. I'd spent 5 years saying no. No to cereal that cost more than $2 a box. No to juice that wasn't frozen concentrate. No to snacks that came in individual packages. No to everything that other kids had in their lunches. "Yes," I said. "Put it in the cart." His eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" He ran down the aisle, grabbing things he'd only ever seen other kids eat. Fruit snacks. Granola bars. String cheese. I let him. Watched the cart fill up with small joys I'd been denying him for so long it had become automatic. At checkout, the total was $187. A month ago, that would have been impossible. Would have meant choosing between groceries and electricity. Would have meant panic and recalculation and putting half of it back. I swiped my card. It went through. We loaded the bags into the car and drove home. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The apartment was still small. Still had thin walls and neighbors who fought and mold I couldn't completely eliminate. But I could afford it now without choosing between heat and food. Could pay rent on time without watching my bank account hit negative. Small changes started stacking up. I bought Lucas new shoes. Not from the clearance rack. Not 2 sizes too big so he could grow into them. Shoes that fit. Shoes with the cartoon characters he liked. He wore them to school and came home smiling, talking about how his friends said they were cool. I bought myself clothes for work. 3 shirts. 2 pairs of pants. A cardigan. Nothing fancy. But they fit properly and didn't have stains I'd tried to scrub out. I looked professional. Felt professional. Started believing I belonged in spaces I'd only ever felt like an imposter in. We went to the park. Not just the one with broken equipment down the street, but the nice one across town with swings that weren't rusted and a playground that looked like it had been built this decade. Lucas played with other kids while I sat on a bench and watched. And for once I wasn't calculating bus fare or worrying about the time or wondering if we could afford to be there. I signed Lucas up for soccer. The registration fee was $85. A year ago, that would have been impossible. Would have meant another thing to apologize for. Another way I was failing him. But I paid it. Bought him cleats and shin guards. Drove him to practice twice a week and stayed to watch. He scored his first goal 3 weeks into the season. Looked for me in the crowd immediately. His whole face lighting up when he found me. I cheered so loud the other parents turned to look, but I didn't care. My son was playing soccer. My son was happy. My son was getting to be a kid. The ceramic bird was still on the counter. Still broken. But somehow it looked different now. Like maybe being broken and surviving wasn't the same as being destroyed. Work became more than just a paycheck. Carol, my supervisor, noticed I was good at organizing things. Asked if I wanted to help coordinate an upcoming fundraising event. Said I had potential. Used words like leadership and growth opportunity. I said yes. Not because I thought I deserved it, but because I was learning that maybe I did. The event was successful. Raised $40,000 for the non-profits programs. Carol pulled me aside afterward and said, "You're good at this. Have you thought about moving into program management?" I hadn't, but I started thinking about it. Started imagining a future where I wasn't just surviving, but building something. Where Lucas could grow up watching his mother succeed, not just struggle. One night, after tucking Lucas into bed, I sat at the kitchen table and did something I hadn't done in years. I made a list of goals. Not survival goals. Pay rent, keep utilities on, find food. Real goals. Things I wanted, not just things I needed to avoid. Learn project management. Save for an emergency fund. Move to a better apartment. Take Lucas on a real vacation. Show him that life can be good. I taped the list to the refrigerator, next to the certificate from Carol's training program and Lucas's soccer schedule. Evidence that we were more than our worst moments. That 5 years of struggle hadn't broken us permanently. Something inside me was still breathing. And now, for the first time in so long, it felt like enough air was getting through. 2 years passed. Not quickly. Not easily. But they passed with a rhythm I'd almost forgotten was possible. Waking up without dread, paying bills without panic, watching Lucas grow in ways that felt like victory instead of survival. I'd been promoted. Program coordinator at the non-profit. Salary increase. More responsibility. Carol said I was a natural leader. that she'd never seen someone rise so quickly from administrative work to management. I didn't tell her it was because I'd spent years managing impossible situations with no resources. Poverty had been the best training program I never asked for. Lucas was 7 now, playing soccer, making friends, bringing home report cards with grades that made me cry in the best way. He'd stopped asking about his father years ago, stopped waiting for someone who'd made it clear he wasn't coming. We'd moved into a better apartment. 2 bedrooms. Lucas had his own room for the first time in his life. He'd decorated it with posters of soccer players and drawings from school. I'd stand in the doorway sometimes and just look at it, proof that we'd made it through. The ceramic bird was still with us, on the kitchen counter of our new place. I'd almost thrown it away during the move, but Lucas had picked it up and said, "We should keep this, Mom. It's been everywhere with us." So we kept it. I'd started dating. Nothing serious. A few coffee dates that went nowhere, a couple dinners that felt forced. Turned out I didn't trust easily anymore. Didn't believe in promises. Had walls so high most people didn't bother trying to climb them. But I was content. Happy, even. In a quiet, hard-earned way that felt more real than anything I'd felt before. Then, on a Tuesday evening in October, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Had learned to ignore calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Usually debt collectors from medical bills I was still paying off, or scammers trying to sell me things I didn't need. But something made me answer. Hello. Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years but would recognize anywhere. It's me. 2 words. Casual. Like he'd talked to me yesterday. Like he hadn't disappeared into silence so complete I'd sometimes wondered if he was even still alive. My hand tightened around the phone. Lucas was in his room, doing homework. The apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. "What do you want?" My voice came out colder than I intended. Or maybe exactly as cold as I intended. I wanted to talk. To see how you are. How Lucas is. Lucas. He said the name like he had the right to. Like he'd been there for birthday parties and soccer games and fevers at 3 a.m. and first days of school and all the moments that actually made you a parent. "We're fine. I heard you're doing well. Working at a non-profit. I'm really happy for you." Heard. From who? Had he been checking on us? Watching from a distance while refusing to actually show up? The thought made my skin crawl. "What do you want?" I asked again. He cleared his throat. "I want to see him. Lucas. I want to be part of his life again. Again." That word. The same word he'd used at the door 2 years ago when I'd closed it in his face after taking those cheap flowers. You had 5 years to be part of his life. I know. I messed up. I was young, I was scared, I didn't know how to handle. Handle what? Responsibility. Parenthood. The child you helped create. The anger rose so fast it surprised me. I thought I'd let it go. Thought I'd moved past it. But it was right there, waiting. I'm different now. I have a good job. I'm stable. I can help. I want to help. Stable. The same word he'd used before. The word that meant nothing coming from someone who'd proven words were just sounds without action behind them. You owe $32,000 in back child support. Silence. He hadn't expected me to know the exact number. But I did. I checked every year, watching it climb, watching proof accumulate that he'd chosen himself over his son for half a decade. I can start paying. I will pay. I need a chance. I need to make this right. Lucas appeared in the doorway. Mom, who are you talking to? I looked at my son. 7 years old. Beautiful. Smart. Kind despite everything. He'd built a life without a father. Built himself into someone remarkable with half the resources most kids had. And now the man who'd given him nothing wanted to show up and claim credit. Wanted to step into a story he'd abandoned in the first chapter and pretend he'd been there all along. "No one important, baby," I said to Lucas. "Go finish your homework." He disappeared back into his room. Was that him? My ex's voice cracked. Was that Lucas? "You don't get to do this," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't get to disappear for 5 years and then show up wanting to be Dad of the Year." "I'm not trying to. You left when he was 3 weeks old. 3 weeks. He's 7 now. You missed everything. You chose to miss everything. I know. And I want to fix it. Please. Just give me a chance. Let me see him. Let me prove I've changed." I thought about all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering how I'd survive. All the meals I'd skipped. All the shame I'd swallowed. All the moments I'd wanted to give up, but didn't because Lucas needed me. And now this man wanted me to just let him in, trust him, give him access to the child he'd abandoned. "I need to think about it," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. "Thank you. That's all I'm asking. Just think about it." He gave me his number. Said to call him when I was ready to talk more. I hung up and stood in the kitchen, staring at the ceramic bird. And then the phone rang again. The second call was from a number I didn't recognize either. I answered, still shaking from the first conversation. "Is this Lucas's mother?" A woman's voice. Professional. Detached. "Yes." "Who is this?" "I'm calling from the Child Support Enforcement Office. We've been attempting to locate the father of your child regarding the outstanding balance of $32,847 in unpaid support. We finally made contact with him today, and he's agreed to a payment plan." I sat down at the kitchen table. The ceramic bird stared at me from the counter. "A payment plan?" "Yes. He'll be paying $500 per month until the balance is cleared. His wages will be garnished to ensure compliance. I wanted to inform you that the first payment should process within 2 weeks." After she hung up, I just sat there. 5 years of silence. 5 years of court orders ignored. 5 years of a balance that grew while I struggled to keep the lights on. And now, suddenly, he was paying. Not out of love. Not out of guilt. Because someone finally forced him to. I called Carol, my supervisor. She'd become more than a boss over the years. A mentor, a friend, someone who understood the weight single mothers carried. "He wants to see Lucas," I told her. "After 5 years of nothing, he just wants back in." "What do you want?" she asked. I didn't know. That was the problem. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face the way he'd slammed it on us. Part of me wanted him to feel every ounce of pain he'd caused. Part of me wanted revenge. But there was another part. The part that had grown through struggle. The part that had learned that strength wasn't about destroying people who hurt you. It was about refusing to let them keep hurting you. "I want to protect Lucas," I said finally. "That's all I've ever wanted." Over the next week, I did research. Called lawyers. Talked to therapists who specialized in childhood trauma and absent parents. Everyone said the same thing. If the father wanted visitation, he had legal rights. But so did Lucas. The right to stability. The right to protection. The right to not be abandoned again. I found out more about my ex's situation through mutual acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Found out he'd been living 2 states away. Had a decent job, not wealthy, but comfortable. No other children. No serious relationships. He'd been living his life. Free. Unburdened. While I'd been drowning. But something had changed. His mother, Lucas's grandmother, had gotten sick. Cancer. Terminal. And she'd asked about her grandson. Asked why her son had abandoned him. Asked questions that apparently made him look at himself in a mirror he'd been avoiding for 5 years. That's when he'd started the calls. That's when he'd agreed to the payment plan. Not because he'd suddenly become a better person, but because he was facing mortality and realized his legacy was abandonment. I felt something then. Not quite satisfaction. Not quite pity. Something in between. He'd lost 5 years with an incredible child. 5 years of first words and first steps and soccer goals and report cards and bedtime stories and all the tiny moments that make a life. He'd chosen to miss it. And nothing, no amount of money, no amount of regret, could give him that back. I was the one who'd been there. I was the one Lucas ran to when he was scared. I was the one he trusted. I was the one who'd built a life from ruins while his father watched from a comfortable distance. That was my justice. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just the undeniable fact that I'd won. Not in a way that felt triumphant, but in a way that felt true. I called him back. You can see Lucas, I said. But on my terms. Supervised visits. Once a month to start. And the moment you hurt him or disappoint him or make him feel like he's not enough, you're done. Do you understand? Silence. Then, yes, thank you. I understand. And one more thing, I said, my voice steady. You don't get to be Dad. You don't get to walk in and claim a title you didn't earn. You're Michael. Just Michael. If Lucas decides someday that you've earned more than that, it'll be his choice. Not yours. Okay, he said quietly. That's fair. Fair. Nothing about this was fair. But it was mine to control now. That was the difference. I told Lucas that night. Carefully. Watching his face for reactions. Your father wants to meet you, I said. Lucas looked up from his homework. Why? Because he made a mistake. A big one. And he wants to try to fix it. Can you fix a 5-year mistake? Lucas asked, and the wisdom in those words broke my heart. I don't know, baby. But we'll find out together. And if it doesn't feel right, we stop. Okay. He nodded. Went back to his homework. Didn't ask any more questions. That night, I looked at the ceramic bird one last time before bed. Still broken. Still here. Still somehow beautiful in its brokenness. Justice, I realized, wasn't about making him suffer. It was about knowing I'd survived. That Lucas and I had built something real and strong and good without him. That his absence hadn't destroyed us. It had forged us. And now, if he wanted in, he'd have to earn it. Every single day. The way I had. The first supervised visit happened at a neutral location. A family visitation center recommended by my lawyer. A place designed for moments like this, where broken families tried to stitch themselves back together under fluorescent lights and watchful eyes. I'd prepared Lucas as best I could. Told him that Michael, not Dad, never Dad unless Lucas decided otherwise, was someone who wanted to meet him. Someone who'd made mistakes but was trying to fix them. Do I have to like him? Lucas asked in the car on the way there. No, baby. You don't have to feel anything you don't feel. You just have to be yourself. The waiting room smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. There were toys scattered on a worn rug, chairs lined up against walls painted a color that was trying too hard to be cheerful. Michael arrived 5 minutes early. I saw him through the window before we went in. He was pacing. Nervous. Holding a wrapped present that looked expensive and desperate. When we walked in, he froze. Lucas stood next to me, gripping my hand, looking at this stranger who was supposed to be his father. 7 years of distance compressed into one moment. Hi, Michael said, his voice cracking. You must be Lucas. Lucas didn't say anything. Just looked at him with those careful eyes that had learned early how to protect himself. I brought you something, Michael said, extending the present. A soccer ball. Official. Professional grade. The kind Lucas had wanted but I couldn't afford. Lucas looked at me. I nodded. He took it carefully, like it might disappear. Thank you, he said, polite but distant. I sat in the corner while the supervisor, a kind woman named Mrs. Chan, facilitated their interaction. Watched Michael try to bridge a 5-year gap with questions that felt rehearsed. Watched Lucas answer in monosyllables, giving nothing away. It was awkward. Painful. Michael tried too hard. Lucas gave too little. An hour felt like a lifetime. When it was over, Lucas ran to me. Not away from Michael, exactly, but toward safety. Toward the person who'd always been there. In the car going home, Lucas was quiet. Then, "He seems nice." "He does," I said carefully. "But he's not my dad, is he?" "Not really." I thought about how to answer that. About the difference between biology and presence. Between showing up once and showing up always. "He's trying to be," I said. "But being a parent is about more than trying. It's about doing. And you get to decide what he means to you." Lucas nodded. Went back to looking out the window. The visits continued. Once a month. Then twice. Michael was consistent, at least. Showed up on time. Brought age-appropriate gifts. Made effort. Whether it was genuine or guilt-driven didn't really matter. The result was the same. The child support payments came like clockwork. $500 deposited on the first of every month. It would take years to clear the debt, but it was happening. And slowly, something in me began to shift. Not forgiveness, not at first, but something softer than anger. A kind of tired acceptance that holding on to rage was exhausting me more than it was hurting him. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with the ceramic bird, picked it up, turned it over in my hands. Still broken. Still imperfect. Still here. I thought about all the years I'd carried this thing from apartment to apartment. Thought about why I couldn't throw it away. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't hope that he'd come back. It was proof. Proof that broken things could survive. That damage didn't mean destroyed. I'd spent so long being angry at him for leaving. And I had every right to that anger. But anger was a weight I'd been carrying alongside everything else. The bills, the exhaustion, the fear, the responsibility. What if I just put it down? Not for him. Not because he deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about saying what he did was okay. It wasn't about forgetting or excusing or pretending the last 5 years hadn't happened. It wasn't even about letting him off the hook. It was about releasing myself from the prison of his choices. About refusing to let his absence define me anymore. I'd already won. Lucas was thriving. I had a career I was proud of. We had a home. We had stability. We had each other. His abandonment had nearly destroyed us, but we'd survived. We'd done more than survive. We'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. That was my victory. Not making him suffer. Not holding on to bitterness. Just living well. Living fully. Living in a way that proved his absence hadn't been the end of our story. Just an obstacle we'd overcome. I looked at Lucas one evening while he did homework at the kitchen table. 8 years old now. Confident. Smart. Kind. Everything I'd hoped he'd be despite everything we'd been through. "Mom," he said, not looking up from his math worksheet. "I think Michael's okay." Yeah. He's not you. But he's trying. And that's something, right? Wisdom from an 8-year-old who'd learned more about grace than most adults ever would. "That's everything, baby," I said. That night, I finally threw away the ceramic bird. Not in anger. Not in symbolism. Just because it was time. Because I didn't need reminders of brokenness anymore. I was living proof that you could be shattered and still be whole. Forgiveness came quietly after that. Like snow falling. Barely noticeable until you looked up and realized the landscape had changed. I didn't tell Michael I forgave him. He didn't need to know. This was for me. For Lucas. For the life we'd built and the future we deserved. Some lessons cost everything to learn. But they make you into someone who can't be broken the same way twice. 3 years later. Lucas was 10 now. Double digits. Old enough to understand complexity. Old enough to see the world in shades of grey instead of just black and white. Michael came to his soccer games. Not every one. He'd learned that showing up consistently was different from showing up constantly. But he came enough. Sat in the bleachers. Cheered at appropriate moments. Stayed in his lane. They weren't father and son in the traditional sense. More like friendly acquaintances learning to trust each other slowly, carefully, like two people walking on ice that had frozen but might not hold their full weight yet. But it was something. And sometimes, something was enough. I'd been promoted again at the non-profit. Director of programs now. Leading a team. Making decisions that affected hundreds of families. Using the skills I'd learned in the hardest classroom imaginable. Survival. We'd moved into a real house. Small. 2 bedrooms. A backyard where Lucas could play. A kitchen with a window that caught morning light the same way that first apartment used to, back when I still believed in promises. I'd unpacked the last box on a Saturday morning. Lucas was outside, kicking a soccer ball against the fence. The sound, that rhythmic thump, 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 was the soundtrack of a childhood I'd fought to give him. Inside, I stood in the kitchen arranging things on counters. Coffee maker. Fruit bowl. A small plant I'd bought because it felt like something people with stable lives did. They kept plants alive. There was a knock at the door. 3 soft taps. Gentle. Familiar. My body tensed automatically. Old patterns. Old fears. Even after all this time, that specific rhythm still carried weight. But when I opened it, fully this time, no 6-inch crack, no defensive positioning, it was just a neighbor. An older woman with kind eyes holding a casserole dish. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, smiling. "Thought you might appreciate not having to cook tonight." I took the dish. Felt the warmth through the ceramic. Felt something else too, belonging. The kind that doesn't come from geography but from finally believing you deserve to take up space. "Thank you," I said. Meant it. That night, Lucas and I ate the casserole at our new dining table. A real table. Not a hand-me-down. Not something salvaged from a curb. Something I'd chosen and bought with money I'd earned doing work that mattered. "Mom," Lucas said between bites. "Are we doing okay now?" I looked at him. Really looked. At the boy who'd survived poverty and uncertainty and a father's absence. At the child who'd grown into someone remarkable not because of his circumstances but despite them. "Yeah, baby," I said. "We're doing more than okay." "Good," he said simply, and went back to eating. Later, after he went to bed, I stood at my bedroom window looking out at the backyard. The fence. The grass that needed mowing. The small garden I was planning to plant in spring. I thought about the ceramic bird. About how I'd carried that broken thing through 4 apartments and 5 years of struggle before finally letting it go. I thought about doors. About the one I'd closed that night when Michael showed up with cheap flowers. About all the doors I'd had to close to protect us. About all the doors that had been closed in my face. Jobs I didn't get, assistance I was denied, opportunities that belonged to people with different circumstances. But I'd also learned something about doors. That closing them wasn't always about shutting people out. Sometimes it was about protecting what you'd built on the other side. Sometimes it was about choosing yourself, choosing your child, choosing survival over sentiment. And opening them, really opening them, fully without fear, that took even more courage. Required healing you couldn't rush. Required believing you were safe enough to be vulnerable again. I'd opened doors in the last 3 years. To opportunities. To friendships. To the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I'd earned the right to stop fighting quite so hard. The child support debt was almost paid off. Another year and it would be clear. Numbers on paper that would finally stop reminding me of everything he'd stolen from us. But the real debt, the one that couldn't be quantified in dollars, that was different. He owed Lucas years. Owed him presence during moments that mattered. Owed him the kind of security that comes from knowing both your parents chose you. That debt couldn't be repaid. Only acknowledged, grieved, released. I'd done the work of releasing it. Not for him. For me. For Lucas. For the life we deserve to live without the weight of old anger pulling us backward. In the morning, I'd make coffee. Lucas would eat breakfast at our table. We'd go about our Saturday, grocery shopping, soccer practice, maybe a movie if we had time. Normal things. Boring, beautiful, ordinary things that used to feel impossible. We'd built this life. Not perfectly. Not without scars. But we'd built it. And standing at that window in our house, I realized something. I was proud. Not just of surviving, but of who I'd become in the process. A mother. A professional. A person who'd been broken and learned to walk on fractured bones until they healed stronger than before. The door to Lucas's room was slightly open. I could see him sleeping, his chest rising and falling in that perfect rhythm of childhood dreams. Something inside me was still breathing. Not just surviving now. Actually living. And it was enough. We were enough. I was enough. If you're still here, still listening to this story, it's because something in it feels familiar. Maybe you're the mother who's been doing it alone. The one who counts pennies at grocery stores and pretends she's not hungry so her kids can eat. The one who lies awake at 3 a.m. wondering how to make rent and if she's failing because everything feels impossible. Maybe you're the person who walked away. Who left when things got hard. Who's been carrying guilt that weighs more than any child support payment ever could. Who wants to come back but doesn't know if you've burned that bridge beyond repair. Maybe you're the child caught in the middle. Old enough now to understand that your father's absence wasn't about you. That some people can't handle the weight of their own choices and take the coward's way out. That you deserved better, and somehow you survived anyway. Or maybe you're just someone who needed to hear that broken doesn't mean destroyed. That 5 years of struggle doesn't define the next 50. That you can be shattered into 1,000 pieces and still put yourself back together into something beautiful. This story isn't unique. That's the tragedy and the triumph of it. Right now, in this moment, there are millions of single mothers doing exactly what I did. Making impossible math work, choosing between electricity and food, working multiple jobs while their children sleep at neighbors' houses, carrying shame they didn't earn for poverty they didn't choose. The statistics are staggering. Single mothers are 5 times more likely to live in poverty than married couples with children. Over 30% struggle with food insecurity. Many work full-time jobs and still can't afford basic necessities. And child support. The system is broken. Billions of dollars go uncollected every year while children go without, and mothers drown trying to compensate for fathers who simply don't. But here's what the statistics don't capture. The resilience. The quiet heroism of women who refuse to break even when breaking would be easier. The way children learn strength from watching their mothers survive. Lucas is 12 now. He plays competitive soccer. Gets straight A's. Volunteers at the same non-profit where I work. He's kind. Confident. Secure in ways I never imagined possible during those years when we could barely keep the lights on. Michael comes to some of his games. Pays his child support on time. Exists in Lucas's life as a supportive figure, but not the central one. Lucas calls him Michael, occasionally Dad, when the moment feels right. It's Lucas's choice. Always has been. The debt was fully paid last year. $32,847. It took 6 years. Every payment felt like a small acknowledgement of everything he'd stolen. Not enough to erase the damage, but something. I didn't spend it on myself. Put it all into a college fund for Lucas. Turned his father's absence into his future. Turned debt into possibility. That's the secret they don't tell you about survival. You get to decide what it means. You get to choose whether trauma defines you or refines you. Whether abandonment makes you bitter or makes you better. I chose better. For Lucas. For me. For every single mother who came before me and everyone who will come after. If this story resonated with you, if you saw yourself in these words, if you felt the weight of these struggles or recognized the shape of this pain, then it belongs to you too. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. The single mother in your life who's drowning but won't admit it. The friend who's been absent and needs to understand the real cost of that absence. The person who survived their own version of this story and needs to know they're not alone. We survive by witnessing each other. By saying, I see you. I've been there. You're going to make it through. You're going to make it through. Something inside you is still breathing. And as long as it's breathing, there's hope. There's possibility. There's a future that doesn't look like your past. I promise you, you're stronger than you think. You've already survived the worst days. Everything else is just practice. Keep going. Keep fighting. Keep breathing. Your story isn't over yet. There's a truth they don't teach you in school, don't put in parenting books, don't mention in wedding vows. Sometimes the person you love most will hurt you in ways you never imagined possible. And somehow, you'll survive it anyway. This isn't just a story about a deadbeat father or a struggling single mother or a child caught between two versions of love. It's a story about what happens when life breaks the contract you thought you'd signed. You think you're building something together. A family. A future. A life where promises mean something and love translates into action. And then one day you wake up and realize you've been building alone. That the foundation you thought was solid was actually just you, holding up the weight of two people's dreams with one person's strength. Nearly 1 in 3 single-parent families live below the poverty line. Single mothers are almost 3 times more likely to experience poverty than two-parent households. These aren't just numbers. They're lives. They're women working multiple jobs while their children sleep at neighbors' houses. They're skipped meals and turned-off utilities and shame that sits in your throat like something you can't swallow. But here's what those statistics don't capture. They don't measure the strength it takes to keep going when giving up would be easier. They don't quantify the love that makes a mother choose hunger so her child can eat. They don't track the resilience of children who learn early that life is hard but survivable. The universal lesson isn't about single motherhood specifically. It's about what all of us carry when life doesn't go according to plan. It's about the moment you realize no one is coming to save you, and somehow that realization becomes the thing that saves you. Because once you stop waiting for rescue, you start building your own ladder out of whatever materials you have. Broken promises, late-night tears, determination that tastes like copper in your mouth. It's about understanding that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's not saying, what you did was okay. It's saying, what you did nearly destroyed me, but I'm choosing not to let it finish the job. It's about learning that you can be shattered and whole at the same time. That broken doesn't mean worthless. That scars are just proof you survived something that tried to kill you. Every person listening to this has been broken by something. Maybe not abandonment. Maybe not poverty. But something. A betrayal. A loss. A moment when the universe showed you that fairness is a myth and justice is something you have to create for yourself. And you have 2 choices in that moment. Let the breaking define you, or let it refine you. I chose refinement. Not because I'm special or strong or heroic. Because I had a child who needed me to. Because the alternative, bitterness, rage, permanent victimhood, would have destroyed us both. But here's the thing about choosing refinement. It's not a one-time decision. It's a choice you make every single day. When the child support check is late and the anger rises. When you see him at a soccer game playing the role of dad after years of absence. When your son asks questions you can't answer without lying or devastating him. Every day you choose. Revenge or peace. Rage or release. The past or the future. The universal truth is this. We all survive things we think will kill us. And on the other side, we're different. Changed. Sometimes better, sometimes worse, but always different. You get to decide which version you become. The single mothers reading this already know. You've been making impossible choices for so long they feel normal. You've been surviving on strength you didn't know you had. You've been building futures for children who will never fully understand what you sacrificed until they have children of their own. You're not broken. You're not failing. The system is broken. The society that makes single motherhood synonymous with poverty is broken. The culture that lets fathers walk away while mothers drown is broken. You are whole. Even when you're exhausted. Even when you're scared. Even when you're one bad month away from losing everything. And to anyone who's been the person who left, it's not too late to show up. Not to erase the damage. You can't. Not to reclaim what you lost. It's gone. But to acknowledge. To contribute. To prove through years of consistent action that you understand what you stole. 5 years of payments don't erase 5 years of absence. But they're something. And sometimes, something is where redemption starts. To the children growing up in single-parent homes, your father's absence isn't about your worth. Some people can't handle the weight of their own choices. That's their failure, not yours. You are loved. You are enough. You are growing up watching a parent who refuses to quit, and that's teaching you more about strength than any two-parent household ever could. The universal lesson is simple and impossibly hard. You survive by deciding to. By waking up every day and choosing breath over surrender. By building tiny victories into mountains. By learning that rescue isn't coming, but you're stronger than you thought anyway. Something inside you is still breathing. As long as it's breathing, you have power. You have choice. You have a future that doesn't look like your past. That's the promise. That's the truth. That's what survival teaches anyone willing to listen. 10 years after the knock. Lucas is 17 now. Taller than me. Voice deep. Face shaped by time and genetics into something that looks like his father but acts like someone entirely his own. He got accepted to college. Full ride. Soccer scholarship and academic merit. The acceptance letter sits on our refrigerator. Not because he needs the validation, but because I do. Because every time I look at it, I see proof that poverty doesn't have to be permanent. That struggle doesn't have to be a life sentence. Michael came to the graduation party. Sat in the corner, appropriate distance maintained, years of supervised visits having taught him his place in this story. He's been consistent. Not perfect, but present. The child support debt was cleared 4 years ago. He still sends money monthly anyway. Still shows up to games. Still exists in Lucas's life in whatever capacity Lucas allows. They have a relationship now. Not father-son in the traditional sense. But something. Lucas calls him dad sometimes. Michael cries every time. I don't hate him anymore. Don't love him either. He exists in a space beyond either emotion. Someone who caused immense pain and is spending the rest of his life trying to make up for damage that can never be fully repaired. That's enough. It has to be. The house we live in now is the 4th one. Each one a little bigger than the last. Each one proof that upward mobility isn't a myth if you're willing to work yourself to the bone and get lucky a few times along the way. I was promoted to executive director of the non-profit last year. The same organization where I started as an administrative assistant making $1,847 every 2 weeks and feeling like I'd won the lottery. Now I run it. Make decisions that affect thousands of families. Use my experience, the poverty, the struggle, the systems that failed me, to build better ones. Carol retired. Gave me the bird figurine from her desk during her going-away party. It was identical to the one I'd thrown away years ago. Same chipped wing, same broken beauty. For remembering, she said. That broken things still fly. It sits on my desk at work now. Reminds me daily who I'm fighting for. This morning, Lucas and I had coffee together before he left for his summer job. He's saving money for college, expenses the scholarship doesn't cover. Working construction. Coming home exhausted and proud and completely unaware that watching him succeed feels like watching every prayer I ever whispered in the dark get answered. Mom, he said, stirring sugar into his mug. I've been thinking about something. Yeah. You did this alone. 4 years. And you never complained. Never made me feel like I was a burden. Never let me see how hard it was. I didn't know what to say. Didn't trust my voice. I just wanted to say, thank you. For everything. For not giving up. For being enough when you didn't think you were. I cried. Right there at the kitchen table. The kind of tears that come from years of holding everything together finally being acknowledged by the one person whose opinion mattered most. He hugged me. My baby who isn't a baby anymore. My son who survived poverty and absence and all the things that statistics said should have destroyed him. My child who became extraordinary not because of his circumstances but despite them. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. So much. After he left, I stood at the kitchen window. Same position as 10 years ago, different house, different life. The morning light came through at exactly the right angle, hitting the counter the way it used to in that first apartment where I learned what it meant to be abandoned. But I'm not that person anymore. She exists somewhere in my memory, the girl who thought love was enough, who believed in promises, who didn't know yet that survival was a skill she'd have to learn. I'm grateful to her. For holding on when letting go would have been easier. For choosing Lucas every single day even when choosing herself would have hurt less. For being strong enough to break and still wake up the next morning. Something inside me is still breathing. Not struggling for air anymore. Not gasping. Just breathing. Easy. Steady. The way it's supposed to be. The door opens behind me. Lucas, back already. Forgot my keys, he says, laughing, grabbing them from the counter. 3 soft sounds. The door opening. Keys jangling. The door closing again. Not a knock this time. Not someone asking permission to enter a life they abandoned. Just my son. Coming and going freely. Secure enough to forget things because he knows home will always be here. That's the victory. Not the house or the job or the money that finally stops running out before the month does. Not even Lucas's college acceptance or Michael's belated attempts at redemption. The victory is knowing we survived. That poverty and abandonment and all the things designed to break single mothers didn't break us. That we built something beautiful from ruins. That we're still here, still breathing, still whole even in our brokenness. I pick up my coffee. Take a sip. It's exactly how I like it now. No longer calculating the cost of each cup, no longer rationing sugar, no longer choosing between coffee and food. Just coffee. Simple. Ordinary. Perfect. Outside, birds are singing. The sun is rising. Lucas is driving to work in a car we bought together. The world is waking up to another day, and so am I. And for the first time in a decade, I'm not afraid of what that day might bring. Because whatever comes, I know now. I can survive it. We can survive it. Something inside me is still breathing. And it always will be.